Welcome to today's video, where we dive into shocking tales of teenage criminals and horrific murder shootings. These events not only shock us with their brutality, but also provoke thoughts about the underlying causes and far-reaching effects of rising violence in society. Let's dive into these chilling cases and the heartbreaking stories behind unimaginable shootings, to gain a deeper understanding of the harsh realities victims face and reflect on the future of the younger generation. If you found this video insightful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more shocking stories ahead. Juan Rodriguez is facing charges of attempted murder and threatening Judge Beatrice Butchko during a hearing in South Florida. Rodriguez appeared in court for stabbing Nathan Morris, a nurse's assistant, at an assisted living community in North Miami. When Judge Butchko denied his release request, Rodriguez angrily threatened, saying, "Listen to me, don't let me out of here, I will kill you. I am Jewish, I will take your life." After being ignored, he repeated the threats, demanding the judge's phone number and shouting, "What do you want from me? What do you want? What is her phone number? If you don't let me out of here, I will kill you." Rodriguez was detained without bail and is facing first-degree murder charges. Randall Moore was convicted of murder and assaulting his mother-in-law. He showed no remorse for killing his estranged wife, Theron Linmore, and instead blamed his circumstances. Moore admitted that his wife's death could have been prevented, claiming, "It could all have been avoided, just let me see my children now." He insulted his mother-in-law, Teresa and Sheila Lynch, calling them losers and accusing them of hating him. Moore even demanded his mother-in-law read his daughter's diary to prove she hated her. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms and 25 years for shooting a police officer. Keith Allen Ferguson, 40, from Michigan, was a brutal murderer. On November 18, 2014, he killed his wife, Tiffany Ferguson, in front of their 4 children. After the murder, Ferguson put on a bulletproof vest, gathered weapons and explosives, and went to his father-in-law James Weber's house to kill him. His violent spree didn't end there. He also held a 59-year-old woman hostage for 7 hours before releasing her and surrendering to the police. During the attack, Ferguson had planned to escape and commit more crimes, but his plans were quickly foiled. When the police arrived, he was arrested without further incident. In court, Ferguson confessed to the murder and other violent acts. He was convicted on multiple charges, including first-degree and second-degree murder, kidnapping, and illegal possession of weapons and explosives intended for criminal use. Ferguson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The court ruled that he would never be released, citing the extreme violence of his crimes. It was emphasized that his actions not only devastated the immediate victims, but also caused deep harm to their families and the community. Deobra Redden, 30, attacked Judge Mary K. Huss during a sentencing hearing at a Las Vegas courthouse. Redden, who had pleaded guilty to assault, requested probation and mentioned his new job. However, when the judge denied his request, Redden became enraged, shouting, jumping over the bench, and struggling with the judge. Shocking footage of the courtroom incident quickly spread on social media. Judge Huss was injured and required medical attention, and a court sheriff and the judge's law clerk were also hurt in the attack. Redden, with a history of serious crimes like domestic violence and robbery, now faces multiple charges, including attempted murder and assault. His lawyer argued that he should be found not guilty due to his schizophrenia diagnosis, a claim supported by Redden's foster mother, who stated he had struggled with mental health issues since childhood. Following the attack, Redden was sentenced to 19 to 48 months in prison. On October 2, 2019, Ricky Bernard Brown took 5 employees hostage at the South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation Center in Newberry, armed with a handgun. When police arrived, Brown fired a shot into the ceiling. 2 hostages escaped through a back door, and 2 others were able to flee safely after an hour of negotiations. Brown eventually released the last hostage, and the SWAT team stormed the building. He fired a few more shots before being arrested. Fortunately, no one was injured. Brown has a lengthy criminal history, including a manslaughter conviction in 1997, which led to a 20-year prison sentence. After being released, Brown became a suspect in a murder case in Newberry in April 2019, but the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Following the hostage situation in October 2019, he faced several serious charges, including kidnapping, firearm possession in a violent crime, resisting arrest, and threatening a law enforcement officer. Brown claimed he was struggling with mental health issues and had sought help 3 times, but received no assistance. During his bond hearing, he made a threatening comment to a police officer, resulting in an additional charge. Ultimately, Brown was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On June 6, 2021, Isaiah Gardenhire, 40, went on a crime spree in Michigan that lasted 45 hours. Gardenhire murdered 13-year-old Adri Dembowski and sexually assaulted several women. Gardenhire was the boyfriend of Adri's mother, Tiffany Dembowski. He attacked Tiffany first and then stabbed Adri to death. After fleeing, he hid in an empty apartment before breaking into another apartment, where he took 2 people hostage, sexually assaulted one, and stole their car. During his trial, Gardenhire acted in a disruptive and crude manner, causing the hearing to be cut short. Gardenhire pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, unlawful imprisonment, and assault with a dangerous weapon. He was sentenced to 75 to 120 years in prison and another 50 to 125 years for the murders of Harley Owens and Kelsey Lennon. Gardenhire showed no remorse for his actions and was described as a remorseless killer. Tyler Daisy from Dubuque, Iowa, was charged and convicted of killing his mother, Jennifer Daisy, and the family dog, Echo, in January 2024. Daisy claimed he committed the murders because he believed his mother was using witchcraft against him. During the trial, which began in July 2024, Tyler refused to participate and compared the trial to slavery, writing in a letter to the court that he did not want to be involved and was only seeking a connection with God. Although Tyler was absent from court, his attorney objected to the evidence presented by the prosecution, which included crime scene photos and the axe used in the killings, which had Jennifer's blood and Tyler's fingerprints on it. Tyler's sister, Kylie, recounted the changes in him before and after he killed their mother and the dog. Kylie felt helpless in the face of his actions, while Tyler mocked and cursed at her, demanding that she read the Bible. Ultimately, Tyler was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kylie later stated that she believed her brother had a mental illness and should receive treatment at a mental health facility rather than being imprisoned. Shondell Jackson was convicted of murdering Nathan Potter in 2009 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At the time, Jackson and his accomplice, Derek Thomas, planned to rob Potter, a 21-year-old student. During the robbery, when they discovered Potter had no money, Jackson shot him. After shooting Potter, Jackson and Thomas fled the scene, leaving Potter severely injured. Potter later succumbed to his gunshot wounds. Throughout the trial, Jackson showed no remorse for his actions, even mocking the victim's family and laughing in their faces in the courtroom. When the sentence was handed down, Jackson reacted violently, prompting authorities to subdue him with pepper spray. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Jackson's family caused a disturbance, expressing hatred towards the Potter family. However, one notable detail was that Jackson's uncle, who had turned him in to the police after he fled, believed the sentence was fair and just. The uncle felt that his nephew's actions were unforgivable, and that the sentence was a fitting punishment for the crime committed. Quincy J. Tuttle, an 11-year-old sixth grader from Vancouver, Washington, was arrested on October 23, 2013, after bringing a handgun, ammunition, and kitchen knives to school. His intention was to use them against a student who had been bullying his friend. Tuttle was caught after his mother reported missing kitchen knives, suspecting he had taken them. Parole officers and a psychologist raised concerns about public safety and recommended that Tuttle be detained until a mental health evaluation could be completed. Tuttle reacted angrily in court, cursing at the commissioner and refusing to leave the courtroom. He was initially charged with several serious offenses, including attempted assault, weapon possession, and bringing weapons to school. However, prosecutors later dropped the murder charges as part of a plea deal, and Tuttle was sentenced to 2 years in juvenile detention and 2 years of probation. Dexter Johnson, currently serving time in Texas, was convicted of murdering 2 people in Harris County in 2006 when he was just 18. Johnson, along with 4 other teenagers, hijacked the car of 23-year-old Maria Ayres and her 17-year-old boyfriend. They forced the couple into the car, drove them to a remote area, and then Johnson and another teenager shot both victims. These murders were part of a 25-day crime spree that included 3 other murders. Johnson was sentenced to death. During the trial, Johnson threw a chair in the courtroom, insisting on his innocence and blaming his lawyer for his situation. His defense argued that he should not face the death penalty due to intellectual disability and schizophrenia, providing evidence that he had an IQ of 70 and struggled with basic skills. Despite this, the jury sentenced him to death. Bass Webb, a convicted murderer from Kentucky, gained notoriety for spitting at Judge Vanessa Dixon during his trial in August 2009. The incident was televised and quickly spread across the internet, leading to Webb being charged with threatening a judicial officer. Webb admitted to killing 2 of his ex-girlfriends, including Bria Runit in 2009, for which he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was also charged with the murder of Sabrina Marie Vaughn, whose body was found in 2010, 7 years after she had gone missing. Webb had a lengthy criminal history dating back to 2000, with charges including attempting to escape from police and assaulting a corrections officer. He was sentenced to 15 years for assaulting a corrections officer and 37 years for attempting to kill 2 law enforcement officers. Joseph Zeeler was convicted of the murders of 11-year-old Robin Cornell and her 32-year-old babysitter Lisa in 1990. The case remained unsolved for many years until 2016, when Zeeler's DNA was linked to the crime scene. Before this, Zeeler had been arrested for assaulting his stepson, and during the investigation, a connection was made between him and the murders. During the trial, Zeeler's ex-girlfriend, Bonnie, testified that he had no memory issues, contradicting Zeeler's own claims that he had no recollection of events related to the crime. Zeeler admitted to having a relationship with Robin's mother, but denied ever meeting the victims. However, he wrote a letter to the Cornell family, blaming one of his relatives for the crimes. In addition to the legal disputes, Zeeler displayed disruptive behavior throughout the trial, shouting at the jury and even elbowing his defense attorney in the face, which caused tension in the courtroom. Ultimately, the jury convicted Zeeler and sentenced him to death for each victim. On February 14, 2018, T.J. Lane carried out a school shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, where he was a former student. Armed with an AR-15 rifle, he shot students and staff, killing 17 people and injuring 17 others. Lane blended into the chaos and attempted to escape, but he was arrested after more than an hour. During his trial, Lane showed no remorse for his actions. On the day of his sentencing, he entered the courtroom and quickly unbuttoned his shirt to reveal a killer T-shirt, a replica of the outfit he wore during the shooting. Even the harsh words from the victim's parents failed to elicit any sympathy from him. One father angrily stated, "If I had the choice, you would die a slow and painful death." Lane was ultimately sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Frank DeLeon Jr., 19, is the suspect in the murder of 15-year-old Diamond Alvarez, a tragic event that occurred on January 11, 2022. At the time, Diamond left home to meet Frank, her boyfriend, after discovering he had been cheating on her. She decided to confront him at a park where they met to talk. After this meeting, Diamond was last seen alive. Her body was later found with 22 gunshot wounds, causing her death on the spot. Frank DeLeon Jr. quickly became the prime suspect in the case. After a few days of investigation, DeLeon was arrested and formally charged with murder. During the trial, DeLeon faced harsh criticism from the victim's family. Diamond's mother, Anna Machado, lost control of her emotions and rushed toward DeLeon in the courtroom, leading to a chaotic confrontation between her and the defendant. This scene sparked anger and sorrow among the family and those present in the courtroom. In the end, Frank DeLeon Jr. pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. This sentence served not only as a punishment for his brutal actions, but also as a reminder of the immense pain that violent acts can cause to families. Nicholas Cruz, a mass shooter, carried out a shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14, 2018, killing 17 students and injuring 17 others. Cruz, a former student at the school, legally purchased an AR-15 rifle and used it to attack the victims without any clear motive. After being arrested, Cruz stated that he carried out the shooting on Valentine's Day because he felt no one loved him. During his trial, the victims' families expressed their fury and anger toward Cruz. The mother of one of the victims said, "You are a filthy animal. You don't deserve to live another day." Cruz was ultimately sentenced to 34 consecutive life sentences without parole for all of his crimes. Ethan Crumbley, a 15-year-old teenager, carried out a school shooting at Oxford High School on November 30, 2021. Prior to the shooting, Ethan exhibited signs of depression and sent disturbing messages to his mother about his mental state, including statements about demons and haunting spirits in the house. He also filmed himself torturing animals, making Molotov cocktails, and even drew plans for a school shooting, which he had jokingly discussed with a friend. On November 30th, Ethan brought a semi-automatic handgun to school and began shooting at students. 3 students died at the scene, and a 4th died in the hospital. Ethan was arrested and faced numerous charges, including terrorism causing death and first-degree murder. He eventually pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Peyton Gendron, 18, committed a horrific mass shooting at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York on May 14, 2022, killing 10 people, all of whom were black. Prior to the shooting, Gendron had researched hate-motivated attacks and had threatened other students at his school. He was investigated for his threats and briefly placed in a hospital for a mental health evaluation, but was released shortly afterward. On the day of the shooting, Gendron brought a rifle into the supermarket and began shooting at people inside. After the shooting, 10 people were dead, and Gendron was arrested without incident. In November 2022, Gendron pled guilty to 15 state charges, including first-degree murder and hate-motivated crimes. During his sentencing hearing, Gendron expressed remorse, but it did little to ease the anger of the victims' families. The judge sentenced him to 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 90 years in prison. Gabe Parker, 15, carried out a brutal school shooting at Marshall County High School in Kentucky on January 23, 2013. The shooting began early in the morning as students were gathering in the Commons area. Parker used a Ruger handgun to kill 2 other 15-year-old students and injure 18 others. After firing, Parker discarded his weapon and fled, but a student recognized him and reported it to a teacher, leading to his arrest. When asked about his motive, Parker stated that he was an atheist and believed that his life, as well as others, had no purpose. He described the shooting as an experiment to see how students and society would react. On June 12, 2020, Parker was sentenced for first-degree murder and assault. During the trial, the families of the victims made emotional statements, expressing their outrage and grief over his actions. Despite Parker showing no remorse, the harsh words from the victims' families created a tense atmosphere in the courtroom. In the end, Parker was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole after 20 years, plus an additional 70 years in prison. Thank you for watching today's video. The stories of violence and crime we've discussed are just a glimpse into the serious issues society is grappling with. I hope this video has helped you better understand the devastating effects of violence and crime, and that it encourages ways to protect and guide the younger generation away from these harmful paths. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments, like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the upcoming videos. See you in the next one. You'll never look at Mary J. Blige the same way again after this. You're probably familiar with Mary J. Blige, the queen of hip-hop soul, who has won the hearts of millions with her emotional voice and powerful style. But behind all the glitter and fame lies a story that few people truly know. A story filled with challenges, pain, and resilience that only those who truly understand can fully appreciate. In this video, we'll dive into the hidden sides of Mary J. Blige's life, the moments that will make you view her in an entirely different light. Join us as we explore the journey, full of obstacles but also immense strength, that has shaped the woman she is today. Mary J. Blige has overcome many struggles in her life to become the music icon we know today. Were you surprised by the challenges she faced? Leave a 1 if you find her truly strong and inspiring, or a 0 if you think otherwise. Enjoy the video, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to continue supporting our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. To the world, she was the epitome of perfection, a queen of hip-hop soul. Mary J. Blige, with a once-in-a-generation voice wrapped in power and platinum albums. But to those who truly understand her, she's not just the queen of music. She's a girl from Yonkers, struggling to survive the tough streets, her family, and the wounds of her past. Before everything unfolded, Mary felt a pain so deep it was beyond words. She remembered the moments of despair, when she felt like she no longer wanted to live. That was when she realized she had fallen in love with someone who had hurt her. She said, "I felt that I'd rather stay and take the hits than let him go, because I felt that if I let him go, I would die." But like so many others, Mary gradually regained her strength and proved that no one could replace her. The love story with Diddy was an emotionally charged chapter in Mary's life. Diddy wasn't just a friend, he was a mentor, a protector, and perhaps the biggest source of inspiration in her career. "When I entered the game, I didn't like myself. I didn't want to succeed. I was afraid of it," Mary admitted. But Diddy saw something in her, and he was the one who helped her reach success. Mary J. Blige has endured not only personal struggles but also turbulent moments in her career. She witnessed her own rise to fame, but it hasn't been without moments of reckoning with her past. Some say she's seen it all, while others claim she helped cover up things better left hidden. Now, fans are asking themselves, is she truly innocent? Mary J. Blige was born on January 11, 1971, at Forum Hospital in the Bronx, New York. But it wasn't the Bronx that raised her. She grew up in Yonkers, where life was never easy. The Schlobaum housing projects were her home, a concrete jungle filled with violence and gunshots. Domestic violence was an undeniable part of life there, not whispered but screamed through thin walls. Mary was raised by her mother, with a deep passion for music. Cora was a strong woman, captivated by the legendary voices of Gladys Knight, Aretha Franklin, and Chaka Khan. Whenever she played their music, she hoped the strength within those songs would inspire her daughters. However, Cora also carried her own demons. She drank to cope with the pain from her broken marriage. Mary J. Blige is not just an artist. She is a symbol of resilience, rising from pain to become an inspiration for millions. She has not only overcome personal traumas, but also triumphed in the music industry, earning the title of Queen in the hearts of her fans, despite battling many shadows along her journey. Mary J. Blige faced many struggles from a very young age. Her father, Thomas Blige, left when she was just 4 years old. He was a Vietnam War veteran, battling his own psychological wounds. Though a jazz musician, music couldn't soothe his inner turmoil. He would occasionally appear in Mary's life, only to disappear again, like a ghost. Eventually, he stopped showing up altogether, leaving a deep void in her heart. Mary was filled with anger, angry at her father, at everything, and at the world. She recalls a time when she felt as though no one loved her. Love in my house was conditional. Affection was rare, but outside it was even worse. Mary witnessed the women in the Schlobaum housing projects, where she grew up with bruised eyes, torn lips, and sometimes barefoot, running out of their apartments in ragged clothes, screaming for help, but no one came. This became a part of life for her, something she no longer flinched at when hearing the screams in the night. The trauma didn't wait until adulthood. When Mary was just 5 years old, she was attacked at a friend's house during a party. It was a moment that shattered her sense of safety before it ever had the chance to form. When I was 5, I remember feeling really right before that happened, she shares. I couldn't believe that this person would do this to me. That wound stayed with her throughout her life, creating a sense of shame and self-blame, making her believe that she had no worth. She kept silent for many years, partly due to the shame and guilt, thinking that somehow it was her fault. This secret quietly developed into a deep wound. Mary began to believe that she was worthless, that she had nothing to offer, and perhaps that she deserved to suffer. Yet amid all the pain, she found a place where she could feel safe: the church. Mary found comfort in the gospel choirs, where her voice began to rise through the pain. Singing became her way to breathe, a release valve for the pressure she didn't know how to express. At school talent shows, Mary sang with her eyes closed, not because she was shy, but because it was the only way she could disappear. When she was 7, Mary performed Reunited by Peaches and Herb at her elementary school. Despite the applause, she didn't feel joy. The feeling of being exposed, unprotected, was what made her uncomfortable more than anything. As she grew older, she wore armor in the form of baggy jeans, Timberland boots, and a backwards cap. She didn't dress like the R&B stars on TV, but rather to hide herself, to avoid being seen and hurt even more. Mary says, I went through so much as a child and a teenager. I started to change, not because I was a boy, but I wore baggy jeans, Timberlands, and a backwards cap so I wouldn't stand out. Every day was a battle as she walked through the projects and had to look serious, because if she didn't, she risked being attacked, robbed, or worse. Her family lived in difficult circumstances, and Mary faced challenges not only from life, but also from within herself. She fought with boys, girls, and even with herself. But music was the place where she found comfort. Even though the world around her hardened her, music still helped soothe her pain. Even as a little girl, I had insecurities and was always sad, but singing made me feel free, she shares. It was the place where she found solace, the only place she could hold on to. Mary started singing with her sister, sitting on the windowsill, humming through the broken curtains, creating melodies from the sound of sirens and chaos. She didn't dream of fame, she only dreamed of escaping her reality. In 1988, she unknowingly stepped out of the shadows of her past, not through a record deal, but through a karaoke booth at the Galleria Mall in Westchester. At that time, Mary was only 17 years old, recently dropped out of school, working as a 411 operator, and trying to escape her painful past. One day, someone dared her to sing at the karaoke booth in the mall, a strange place nestled between kiosks and food courts. She hesitated, then walked in. Holding an Anita Baker record, overwhelmed with excitement, she began to sing not because she thought anyone would hear, but because she needed to hear herself. The raw, soulful recording was never meant to go anywhere, but miraculously, it reached the hands of Jeff Redd, a prominent artist at Uptown Records. And just like that, Mary J. Blige's voice escaped the mall, opening a new chapter in her tumultuous career. Mary J. Blige's voice eventually reached the ears of Andre Harrell, the founder of Uptown Records. For the first time in the industry, someone didn't want to change her. They just wanted to feel her. Andre didn't hear the polish, he didn't hear the training. He only heard the pain of a girl who had been through so much, a girl who had found her voice. Mary wasn't a diva in the conventional sense. She didn't have charm. She didn't have smiling interviews or a legendary lineage. What she had was the truth, raw and uncut. Uptown Records gave Mary a chance. No huge signing bonuses, no grand celebrations, just an opportunity. She joined the label's artist development program, singing backup for Jeff Redd, doing features, and learning the ropes of the industry. She was still living in the projects, still battling depression, still drinking, still partying, and still trying to avoid the traumas that haunted her like cigarette smoke. But now, she had started recording. In those early days, Mary didn't know how to act like a star, and she didn't pretend. She still wore what she liked: baggy jeans, Timberland boots, and a backwards cap. Mary didn't sing to overcome the pain. She sang through the song, allowing her true emotions to pour out. Her authenticity sent the entire record label into chaos. Uptown didn't know how to market her. Mary wasn't Whitney, she wasn't Janet. She wasn't what R&B had known before. But there was someone else paying attention. A new intern at Uptown, ambitious, loud, and dreaming of building a legend. Shaun "Puffy" Combs. And then, one night, everything started to change. Shaun "Puffy" Combs stepped into Mary's life. By the time he officially entered her orbit, Uptown Records was already vibrating with her voice. He watched her from the sidelines, recognizing the uniqueness in her sound, the strength and emotion that only Mary could bring. If you also feel the strength and inspiration from Mary's story, don't forget to leave a like and comment with a 1 if you feel as resilient as she is. If you disagree, leave a 0. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Unlike others, Puffy didn't ask her to sing like anyone else. He didn't try to turn her into someone else. He just wanted her to be herself. These first steps, though not easy, led Mary J. Blige to a legendary career that would later become a symbol of resilience, passion, and an unshakable power in music. Puffy didn't try to hide Mary J. Blige's rawness with layers of sequins or smooth out her edges. He wanted her to keep that roughness, to hold on to the girl in Tim's whose voice cracked because she was being real. Puffy believed that vulnerability wasn't a flaw but a weapon, and Mary J. Blige was the perfect person for him to harness that power. Together, they didn't just make songs, they created a whole new genre. Puffy began producing tracks that blended R&B vocals with heavy hip-hop beats, deep bass, sharp snares, and street soul music. Mary wasn't the kind of performer delivering orchestral ballads like the singers before her. She sang over powerful drum loops like gunshots echoing from the projects she grew up in. Her voice wasn't pure, it was raw and real, and that's exactly what made it unstoppable. In 1992, the album What's the 411 was released, a title that harked back to Mary's earlier job as a 411 operator, always listening before speaking. But now, the world was listening to her. Songs like You Remind Me and Real Love weren't just hits, they were bold statements. This wasn't just R&B, this was hip-hop soul. And Mary J. Blige wasn't just a new voice, she became a movement. However, behind the microphone, she was still struggling. The recording sessions weren't easy. Mary drank heavily, often recording while intoxicated, sometimes breaking down mid-session. Puffy pushed her relentlessly, demanding more from her each day. But no matter how much pain she endured, Mary kept showing up. She poured all her heartbreak, self-loathing, and the shame she carried from childhood into her songs. It was all hidden in every lyric. Fans didn't just hear Mary's songs, they felt them. She sang their pain. Black girls who had never seen themselves in the flawless images of pop stars finally had someone with a voice that mirrored theirs, filled with the same agony they carried. If What's the 411 was Mary J. Blige's introduction, then her next album would be an exorcism, a journey of liberating herself from deep emotional wounds. Along with Puffy, who reshaped her image, it was with Kai Haley that she truly had to face her heart. When they collaborated on a duet, the tension between them was impossible to hide. Fans could feel the conflict, a raw electric charge that even burst through the speakers. At the time, the group KT Jodeci was redefining the image of men in R&B instead of the familiar street image. They brought together boots, tattoos, and gospel-infused music. Mary's pain, with her powerful, emotionally charged voice, blended perfectly with Cates's raspy tone. But something like chemistry in the studio began to unravel behind the scenes. Their relationship, intense from the start, slowly grew complicated. Mary, still grappling with childhood trauma and fame that came too quickly, felt a loss of control. Kai, with her wild energy, was just as chaotic. When they were together, everything became heated, easily erupting. Friends began calling them the Ike and Tina of the 90s. While the comparison might have seemed playful at first, it wasn't long before rumors started to spread within the industry. He abused her, didn't he? And the answer is yes. She endured humiliation, betrayal, physical abuse, and insults. Despite her fame and the crowds cheering her name, Mary couldn't love herself. She believed she deserved the suffering. She still held on to the hope that Kai would change, thinking it was the price to pay for love. I felt that staying and taking the blows was better than letting him go. I felt like if I let him go, I would die. She lived with that belief, loving and enduring, even as everything was slowly falling apart. There were moments of joy, laughter, and the illusion of being the hottest couple in music, but inside, Mary was slowly breaking down. The wounds she had buried for so long, abandonment, addiction, and pain, began to surface. She started drinking more, using more, and those substances were no longer for fun. They became a numbing agent. a temporary escape from the agony. There's a story that was never confirmed but circulated within the industry. One night in Atlanta, Mary, furious and drunk, allegedly stormed into a party that Kai was attending. She was barefoot, her hair a mess, screaming, and Puffy had to drag her into a room to calm her down. It was in that moment she felt herself falling apart, losing control, and all of that collapse played out right in front of the public eye. Mary J. Blige, music, pain, and the proud journey of self-discovery. And yet somehow Mary still performed like a true professional. Music became her big explosion where she turned into real gold. She was truly becoming the queen of hip-hop soul. But behind that spotlight, Mary was still a woman struggling with herself, trying to prove she was strong, even when her heart was still full of unhealed pieces. Her relationship with K-Ci was on and off throughout the 90s. Mary shared that the moment she realized it was truly over wasn't marked by a punch or a fight. It was during an interview in 1995, while in the UK, that K-Ci was asked whether he was going to marry Mary. He laughed, shrugged, and said, "That's not serious." That answer was a wake-up call for Mary. It made her realize she had been holding on to someone who never intended to walk that path with her. And worse, she had built part of her career around that illusion. But this story isn't just about heartbreak. It marked the beginning of Mary facing herself. Her music started to shift. Her lyrics grew darker, and her performances became rawer and more honest. This was no longer the Mary J. Blige from What's the 411. This was the My Life era. And with Before the Rebirth, Mary created an emotional, soul-deep musical storm, like a diary of depression, addiction, and unhealed trauma. During this time, Mary drank heavily, not at parties, but alone. Cognac for breakfast, champagne in the studio, and sometimes she'd even bring a bottle to interviews just to feel numb. Faint lines of coke, studio sessions blurred, there were times she couldn't even remember being there. In an especially dark moment in her apartment, Mary admitted that the problem had become bigger than she could have ever imagined. She said, "It was bigger than me, and it was definitely coming for me. So I thought, this is it, let's go." She remembers sitting on her bed, feeling like her soul was about to leave her body. "I cried and said, 'Please, God, no, not now, I don't want this.' I prayed like I remembered praying." While everyone around her, including Puffy, thought my life was a masterpiece, Mary felt misunderstood. She wasn't just creating a vibe, she was documenting a breakdown. Her beats might have sounded warm, but her lyrics were anything but hidden. One line from the album struck a deep chord. "How can I love somebody else if I can't love myself enough to know when it's time to let go?" She was speaking directly about K-Ci, the man who forced her to confront herself, and the pain she could no longer hide. Mary J. Blige's relationship was falling apart, riddled with constant arguments, physical abuse, and a deep sense of insecurity. The man she once believed would be her lifelong partner, the one she defended and trusted, publicly humiliated her in front of millions. He had supposedly proposed to her with a ring, only to deny it days later during a television interview in the UK. That betrayal devastated Mary. It broke her. But in that painful chapter, something else began to shift, because it was during this time that Kendu Isaacs entered her life. Kendu was a calm and grounded man, working behind the scenes in artist management. Mary first met him while working in the studio with Queen Latifah's team. He wasn't flashy, nor was he caught up in the hype of the entertainment industry. He was simply steady, and that steadiness made Mary feel, for the first time in a long while, truly seen and protected. It marked the beginning of something new in her life, a shift from chaos toward stability, or at least the hope of it. Still, this new love couldn't erase the pain. By 1995, Mary J. Blige wasn't just famous, she was deeply rooted in the music industry. Her voice echoed everywhere, and her face became an unavoidable presence across all forms of media. But behind all that recognition, something quieter was solidifying her legacy. Mary wasn't just an artist, she was becoming a symbol of growth and reinvention, not only in her career but also in her evolving relationship with Puff Daddy. Puffy, who had once been a clumsy intern in the studio, was now Shaun "Puffy" Combs' executive powerhouse behind Bad Boy Records. He hadn't just built a music empire, he had shaped the rise of some of the biggest stars of the era, including Biggie Smalls and Faith Evans. Puff had become a force in the music industry, and Mary remained an essential part of that journey. Her presence, voice, and authenticity were deeply woven into the legacy he was building. Their relationship was never just about business. You could feel the bond between them in interviews, magazine cover shoots, and the way Mary was introduced as Puff's artist. She wasn't just part of Bad Boy, she was the embodiment of what Puff could create from nothing. But not everyone saw it that way. Some believed Mary wasn't merely a star Puff helped shape, they saw her as a pawn in a much bigger game he was playing. Mary stood by Puff throughout this journey, witnessing the arguments, the deals, and the whispered networks within the industry. And over the years, questions continued to surface. What had Mary seen during those years? What did she know about the dark secrets of the music world? Insiders claim that Mary attended parties that would later become the subject of court records and documentary films. Her story, with all its secrets and complex relationships, remains an integral part of the tumultuous journey of the music industry. Mary J. Blige was there when the power games were played and the masks started to slip. Some believe that her silence during those years wasn't out of loyalty, but out of survival. Throughout that time, she never said too much. Her interviews were brief, carefully curated, but you can't live close to the fire without smelling the smoke. And surely Mary witnessed more than she was ever willing to reveal. The brand that Puff built for Mary J. Blige, from her look and sound to her public image, wasn't just a typical marketing strategy. It was the story of a woman carrying pain and secrets that couldn't be hidden. While Puff soared, building Bad Boy into an empire and receiving endless accolades, the scars on Mary's soul deepened. She wasn't just a star, she was a woman being reshaped, repackaged while carrying secrets that no one could see. By the early 2000s, Mary J. Blige had outlasted most of those who had once controlled her story. Puff had shifted his focus, building Bad Boy into a formidable empire. However, Mary still carried her own burdens. The bruises of life, unfavorable contracts, and the whispers about her continued to linger. She endured it all alone, but not all the pain came from the material aspects. A significant portion of it stemmed from things she couldn't help but see and feel. When she began to share the things she had suppressed for so many years, the weight of her words shattered the air like glass. Mary didn't share just for attention or to make headlines. She shared because she had no other way to keep going. The industry could cheer for her success, but even then she still didn't feel safe. Not in love, not in her work, and not even in herself. Her life was still full of struggles. Her drinking increased. The cracks in her mask became more apparent, and one night she swore it felt like her soul was trying to leave her body. That was when she prayed not for fame or money, but simply to survive the dark days she was going through. Music was no longer enough to soothe her. She needed something deeper, something that could truly offer her comfort. And then, that something came, in the form of Kendu Isaacs. At first, when Mary met Kendu Isaacs, she felt as though she had been saved. He brought stability, maturity, and the presence of a father figure. He helped her overcome obstacles, making her feel safe and protected. Mary entrusted him with everything: her trust, her career, and even her name. But history has a way of repeating itself. Looking back, she realized that the greatest lesson she learned about herself was to never doubt her intuition. She came to understand that she needed to love herself more than anyone else. Years later, when Mary filed for divorce, she found herself back at square one. Once again, she felt shattered, betrayed, and silently wounded. Kendu, the man she had trusted, asked her for monthly alimony payments, even though he had built his entire lifestyle off of Mary. But Mary didn't stop moving forward. She kept working tirelessly. She toured, paid alimony, settled taxes, released new albums, earned an Oscar nomination, and even headlined the Super Bowl. That's the thing about Mary J. Blige. Even though the world tried to rewrite her story, she always held the pen to write her own life. Despite facing countless challenges, Mary never gave up. She fought and rose above, proving that no one could dictate her life except herself. And whether she's the strong woman on stage or the one navigating real life, Mary J. Blige will always be the one holding the pen to tell her own story. What do you think about Mary J. Blige's journey, full of struggles yet also immense strength? Do you feel she has inspired you? If you also feel strong and resilient like Mary, leave a 1 in the comments. If you disagree, leave a 0. Enjoy the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe to support our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. In an emotional moment in court, Shaun Kingston could not hold back his tears as he realized he would have to face a harsh sentence. With tears in his eyes, he broke down and begged for his mother, who was also convicted in this fraud case, to be protected. But will his tears be enough to change the course of this controversial case? Join us as we delve into this heartbreaking moment and explore what lies ahead for Shaun Kingston's future. This is an emotional story about Shaun Kingston and the tears he shed in court. What do you think about his reaction to the sentence? Do you believe those tears could change anything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you were also moved by this story, don't forget to leave a sub to support the channel and receive more interesting videos in the future. Thank you for watching, and we wish you an amazing day. Oh my, what a painful wake-up call for Shaun Kingston and his mother, who were recently sentenced for federal fraud charges and now face decades in prison. This is a shocking scandal that Law and Crime has presented. I'm Sierra Gillespie, and you're probably familiar with Shaun Kingston, especially from his hit song Beautiful Girls, released in 2007, a truly catchy tune. But there's a lyric in that song I'd like to point out right now. In the second verse, he sings a line that I won't repeat, but to quote, "When I walked away because of my first crime." Surely it sounds better coming from a singer than an actor in a dramatic scene. But I just want to emphasize that art sometimes mirrors real life. And in this case, Shaun Kingston's life is beginning to resemble those very lyrics. He will be heading to prison alongside his mother, as they were both convicted on 5 counts of federal fraud. Before we go too far, let's talk a bit about Shaun Kingston. He's now 35 years old, and his real name is Keshan Anderson. His mother, Janice Turner, is 62. Federal prosecutors have revealed that they worked together on an online fraud scheme to earn thousands of dollars. It all began with a civil lawsuit, actually filed by Verve Entertainment. The people at Verve said they had collaborated with Shaun Kingston to provide him with a new sound system for his house. He requested a discount on the system in exchange for appearing in a promotional video for their product. He even promised that his close friend, Justin Bieber, would join him in the video. Verve agreed and provided the discounted products to Shaun Kingston. However, the problem began when they didn't receive any of the promised promotional videos, despite the assurance that both Justin Bieber and Shaun Kingston would be involved. Furthermore, they also never received any payment for the products they had supplied. As a result, Verve decided to sue Shaun Kingston for failing to uphold the agreement. This is when investigators began to take notice and dig deeper into the case. Before long, federal charges were brought against them. Both Shaun Kingston and his mother were accused of 5 counts related to wire fraud. In this interview, we'll delve into what wire fraud really is. But generally speaking, prosecutors stated that Shaun Kingston and his mother used money from fraudulent transactions to purchase expensive cars, jewelry, and various other luxury items that they never paid for. So, what Shaun Kingston and his mother did was pretend that they had paid for luxury products, but in reality the money was never transferred. They provided fraudulent documents and said, "We've paid, now give us the luxury car, jewelry, or other high-end items." But the truth is, they never made any payments. All these actions took place last year, in 2024. In May of that year, almost a year ago, I had a conversation with Shaun Kingston's lawyer. You can watch the interview here. For some reason, I showed up dressed like a pilgrim. Certainly, it wasn't Thanksgiving, but it was May. I'm not sure why I chose this outfit, but it is what it is. Besides me, I also had the opportunity to talk to Shaun Kingston's lawyer. At the time, everything was still just allegations. Check out the clip from this interview. A few things I noticed were the organized fraud scheme, grand theft, identity theft, and other related charges. What do you think about these accusations? We didn't think they could be linked to him. Although the allegations still stand, both Kingston mother and son have appeared in court and been convicted. Janice testified against her son, but Shaun Kingston decided not to testify. Therefore, we don't know all the details from his side, except for the defense that he's still a child, even though he's 35 years old. His defense team argued that he didn't know how to manage his finances and didn't understand what he was doing with the money. They claimed it was all just a complete misunderstanding. However, we only heard this from his lawyers, not directly from him. In the end, both mother and son were convicted. According to local reports, when the sentence was read, Shaun Kingston could not hold back his tears. and when his mother was taken away, he screamed, "Protect my mom." Interestingly, Janice, his mother, also had a similar criminal history. In 2006, she pleaded guilty to bank fraud and loan fraud. She was sentenced to 16 months in prison but was released in March 2007, just in time for her son's hit song, "Beautiful Girls," to be released on May 26th of that year. After being released from prison, Shaun Kingston's song, "Beautiful Girls," was released, and they lived their lives at the peak of success with the song for many years to follow. However, everything changed this month when their sentence was announced. Although the final sentence has not yet been determined, one of them had to face immediate consequences. Janice, Shaun's mother, was arrested and is now in jail. As for Shaun Kingston, he has not been incarcerated yet. Instead, he is under house arrest with strict monitoring via a GPS device. It's safe to say that he is being watched both by authorities and through this device. He also posted a bail of $500,000 for a relative's house and an additional $200,000 in cash. One is in jail, while the other is not. However, the final sentence will be determined in July, and both of them face decades in prison, potentially up to 20 years. Who can predict what will happen in this situation? For more detailed information, today we have a special guest criminal defense attorney, Mauricio Padilla from Florida. Let's meet him to gain a deeper understanding of this case. Let me introduce Attorney Padilla, who has joined us today to discuss the case of Shaun Kingston and his mother. To start, what exactly is wire fraud? It's a big term, but it's probably pretty easy to understand, right? That's right. Wire fraud occurs when any fraudulent transaction is made using electronic methods. And what's important to note is that this information is always recorded, so it's very easy for authorities to trace the trail. If these actions are tied to your real identity, connecting the data will be straightforward, and in the end, you'll be held accountable. If you act under a fake identity, authorities will have to overcome some barriers, but in cases like Shaun Kingston and his mother, it's just a matter of time. The previous civil lawsuits, when Shaun Kingston failed to fulfill his commitment to the promotional videos with Justin Bieber, became a key factor in uncovering the criminal case. He had promised to make the commercials in exchange for a discounted sound system, but ultimately did not make any payments. This led to a civil lawsuit, and from there, things escalated, eventually progressing to a criminal case. This is also quite interesting, as we've seen similar cases like P. Diddy's, where civil lawsuits turned into criminal cases. So, do civil lawsuits sometimes serve as a stepping stone to bring the truth to light, leading to further investigations? Exactly. Civil lawsuits like these often help authorities uncover illegal activities, which then leads to expanded investigations and more serious charges being brought forward. So, let me explain. Whenever there's a civil lawsuit against you, there will always be a discovery phase. The lawyers on the other side will work extremely hard because when money is involved, that's when they really put in the effort. They're exploring, uncovering details, and holding on to important information to build evidence of your fraudulent activities. And at any point, they can provide that evidence to the FBI or other law enforcement agencies. As a lawyer, ethically, you are not allowed to use a criminal case to support a civil lawsuit. However, this doesn't mean you can't share information with law enforcement if you believe a crime has occurred. You cannot use that information to threaten the other party, like saying, "If you don't pay me, I'll report you to the FBI." That would be extortion and is not allowed. However, You can provide the information, and often, that's exactly what happens in cases like this. If you are committing crimes and are being sued, you should understand that this sets the stage for the possibility of the FBI or other law enforcement agencies getting involved. The problem is that many of these people are so tight-fisted that instead of paying up and putting the issue to rest immediately, they continue to refuse to pay, even after being sued. They try to drag things out rather than resolve it from the start. These accusations are truly serious, as we're talking about fraudulent activities that could lead to lengthy prison sentences. In my opinion, I've always wondered, why don't they just pay? I would rather pay than go to prison. It's really strange because if I were in their shoes, I would definitely pay up right away instead of facing such serious charges. When the case was first made public, I had an interview with Shaun Kingston's lawyer. He defended him by saying that this was a huge misunderstanding and that Shaun Kingston had nothing to do with the case. However, after being convicted, it became clear that he was guilty. The main defense of his legal team was that, even though Shaun is in his 30s, they still treated him like a child. He didn't know how to manage his finances and didn't fully understand what he was doing. This is why they argued that he wasn't fully aware of his actions, even though he was a famous person. If you think Shaun Kingston was aware of his mistakes, leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think his defense is reasonable? We'd love to hear your opinions on this case. Don't forget to like this video and sub to support the channel if you want to follow more intriguing stories about crime and sentencing. So, Shaun Kingston has been convicted. Do you think his defense was reasonable? I'm not sure. Look, I won't criticize his defense too much, but I have to admit it wasn't effective. He might not have had many options when it came to his defense. I don't know too much about the case or the evidence presented, but when you look at the situations that seem so foolish, I can only imagine the conversations, text messages, and WhatsApp chats he didn't delete, but were later collected when the police seized his phone and his mother's phone. Or even the back-and-forth emails, you know. From my experience, when you start digging deeper into things, everything becomes clearer and even more absurd. So I can only imagine the evidence they have against him and his mother in court. As you said, it's really foolish. Honestly, he made some pretty big moves in his career, but they were also quite ridiculous. For example, when he was working with the sound company, he said, "I'll make a promotional video for you, and Justin Bieber will also participate." And I have to admit, while his song Beautiful Girls was quite popular around 2007, Shaun Kingston is not Justin Bieber. From a business perspective, having Justin Bieber participate in a local commercial like that is truly hard to believe. It goes beyond being absurd. It's almost like an illusion. Anyone who understands the entertainment industry knows that, no, Bieber would never do that. He's Justin Bieber, a global superstar. So essentially, Shaun Kingston has put himself in this difficult situation. It's a serious matter. Judges will impose very strict penalties for these charges. In cases involving financial fraud, federal judges view it as a crime with victims, as money has been stolen and there's restitution involved. These types of cases are extremely serious. I've seen many people get arrested for charges like these, and it's uncertain whether Shaun and his mother will receive any leniency. Now, they will have to go through the investigation process, and the government will prepare a sentencing package, while the court will provide specific guidelines. I understand that Shaun's mother is currently in detention, while he is under house arrest with an electronic ankle monitor. This is a bad situation, but for someone like him, It seems he has placed himself in this position. And we also need to mention his mother, as she is clearly deeply involved in this case. It's interesting to note that Shaun Kingston's mother, Janice, was previously convicted and served time several decades ago for a similar offense. And now, she's facing another sentence. I wonder if this will affect her sentencing, especially considering she was convicted of a similar crime in the past. The fact that she hasn't changed her lifestyle or hasn't been rehabilitated in some way could be a factor influencing the court's decision. Do you think this could affect her sentence? Yes. I think this is exactly how the prosecution will argue when they present their request for sentencing. They will say that Janice hasn't learned her lesson from her previous conviction and that this is a case of recidivism. When you have a prior conviction, especially when the offense this time has similarities to the previous one, that's something the court and prosecutors will use against you when sentencing, especially if you continue to pretend not to understand or be aware of your actions. The government and judges will perceive you as someone who is not remorseful if you continue to pretend that you don't understand why you're here. A lot of the time, what the government and judges want to hear is whether you truly regret your actions. And if you stand before the judge, pretending not to understand why you were convicted, it will raise doubts about your remorse. If you don't acknowledge your wrongdoing and don't show real remorse, that will be a factor that can increase your sentence. This is something the court will consider when making its decision. Another interesting aspect of this case is that Shaun Kingston's mother, Janice, actually took the stand to testify in her defense, which is quite unusual. Shaun Kingston, on the other hand, did not testify. I know that the decision to testify or not is ultimately up to the defendant. But what do those discussions between the lawyer and their client look like when preparing for this? Well, to be honest, I believe that most of your clients shouldn't testify in cases like this. After 22 years in the profession, I can count on one hand the number of clients I believe should have testified. In a case like this, I would definitely advise against it because once you step onto the witness stand, you'll face cross-examination. Although I'm not aware of the specifics of the cross-examination, I can be certain she would have been grilled very intensively. I understand what you're saying, and honestly, there's no real way to explain this. According to the general rule I believe in, no one should testify in their own defense, except in very special circumstances. For example, if you're facing serious charges like sexual offenses, child abuse, or animal cruelty, cases where the jury might feel that if you don't testify to declare your innocence, they'll be more likely to convict you. I think that in cases involving children or animals, if you don't speak up, the jury will likely feel suspicious, and that could worsen your situation. However, in cases of fraud like this one, with wire transfers, bank transactions, and witnesses testifying wouldn't really help much. So, what would you do when you take the stand? Would you pretend to be clueless? If you do that, you would have to face a skilled prosecutor who wouldn't hesitate to cross-examine you and make you confront things that are hard to justify. So testifying in this case is really risky. And clearly testifying didn't work for Shaun Kingston's mother. Not only did it not help, but she was immediately taken to jail, without receiving the leniency her son got, who is only under house arrest with an ankle monitor. Indeed, the word foolish seems like the right term for this interview. It keeps coming up. I've seen enough criminal cases to know that I wouldn't want to testify in a situation like this. When I saw her testify, I thought, oh, that's not the choice I would have made. And sure enough, She was taken to jail immediately. You also mentioned that Shaun Kingston's mother was taken to jail, while Shaun was allowed to stay out, even though he's under house arrest. I really don't understand why there's such a difference. I mean, we've talked about her criminal history. This is an important factor. She has a prior conviction for the same type of crime. This could be the reason she was immediately detained, while Shaun was allowed to stay out. Someone might argue that the flight risk for Shaun Kingston's mother is higher because she isn't a famous person. While Shaun Kingston isn't the most famous celebrity, he still has a certain level of fame. Wherever he goes, people will recognize him immediately. If he were to flee, it would be easy for people to spot him and report him. However, his mother is different. She's not as prominent as her son, and she could easily avoid being noticed. I'm also sure they have connections in Jamaica, where they could easily escape if they wanted to. It's possible the judge considered all of these factors when making the decision. If the judge allowed Shaun Kingston to let his mother be released and she were to fly to Jamaica, that would be a huge mistake he would have to explain. People would begin to question why the judge made such a decision, and it would be an embarrassment for Shaun to explain his actions. In my experience, federal judges rarely allow defendants to be placed under house arrest. They generally don't want to give you that luxury. They just want things to be resolved quickly and not drawn out. I've heard judges tell defendants, "Why not get it over with? You're going to prison anyway, so just do it now." This approach helps avoid issues that could arise after sentencing, such as drug use, intoxication, or other personal problems. These issues can complicate the defendant's case, and judges don't want to have to explain themselves further down the line. So, I was actually a bit surprised when the judge allowed Shaun Kingston to continue living at home under house arrest. I understand that he has to wear an ankle monitor, but I still thought he would have been sent to jail while waiting for sentencing. This decision is quite interesting and not what I would expect from a federal judge in cases like this. Before we talk about the sentence, I'd like to point out an important detail. When the sentence was read, and Shaun Kingston's mother was taken away, after being convicted of 5 counts of wire fraud, he couldn't hold back his emotions. Shaun started crying and yelled, "Protect my mom!" He was deeply upset by this. And this is really interesting. Have you ever witnessed such an emotional outburst in a courtroom? Could you imagine Shaun Kingston reacting that way? I mean, what do you think of his reaction? Listen, I've seen a lot of emotional outbursts in courtrooms, the kind of reactions you can imagine. And what you're describing about Shaun Kingston, I think it's just his way of expressing his love for his mother. After all, he wants everyone to know how much he cares about her. However, I don't think that outburst will influence the judge's decision in any way. And I'm sure his lawyer isn't happy about it, because you never want your client to show that kind of anger. It doesn't help your case at all. I understand what's going on in his head. He might feel like he has the right to protect his mother, and that's why he had such an emotional outburst. But that doesn't really help his situation. As for his mother's testimony, I'm really curious to know how she explained things. There are some things you can't just say outright, and although I haven't heard her testimony, I'm sure she tried to explain the unexplainable why they had all those luxury items without paying for them. One report states that the maximum sentence they could face is 20 years, while another report mentions that each charge could result in 20 years, meaning 5 charges in total. What do you think the overall sentence for both of them will be? When it comes to whether the sentence will be served consecutively or concurrently, I believe the judge always has the final decision. Whether there's an agreement with the government or not, a federal judge will remind them that they could be sentenced to the maximum, which is 20 years for each charge. They always do this because the judge is not bound by any agreement. While the judge may consider the agreement, ultimately, they can impose whatever sentence they deem fit. Even though they could be sentenced to 20 years for each charge, I don't think that's realistic. Even if the sentence for each charge is 20 years, I don't believe the judge will impose that for all the charges unless there's a very specific reason. Judges typically follow sentencing guidelines, and they can only impose a sentence higher or lower depending on the arguments presented during the trial. Even if the judges decide to impose a sentence beyond the guidelines, an appeal could occur if they don't provide a reasonable explanation for the increased sentence. When you have clients, you always have to explain to them the maximum sentence they could face. However, it's important to help them understand that while the maximum sentence could be 20 years for each charge, the reality is that they are likely to be sentenced at a lower level within the range the judges can apply. This is why I think the sentence for Shaun Kingston and his mother won't be as high as 20 years for each charge, but rather at a lower level, depending on the factors of the case. So, we'll have to wait and see what the exact sentence will be when it's announced in July. Certainly there will be more factors coming to light by then, and we'll keep track of the final outcome. Mauricio, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights on this case and the sentencing. I'm sure you've been following this story with curiosity, right? Leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on this case. What do you think about the sentence Shaun Kingston and his mother could be facing? If you have ideas for future Scandal episodes, don't hesitate to share them with us. If you're a fan of crime and sentencing stories, don't forget to leave a sub and like this video to support the show. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.